Welcome. It is a special treat to introduce our guest today, Karen McKy. Karen is an international certified PSYCH-K instructor, as well as a former clinical hypnotherapist and brain mapping technician. She studied with the originator of PSYCH-K, Rob Williams, and with Dr. Bruce Lipton. And for those of you who have not yet heard of PSYCH-K, it is a profound set of processes which assist the subconscious mind to rewrite self-limiting subconscious programs into life-enhancing subconscious programs or beliefs. And you're going to learn even more about that today. Karen also has a diverse business background with over 40 years in both the corporate and entrepreneur arenas. Now, on a personal note, Karen is my teacher and mentor. She was my instructor for the PSYCH-K Advanced Integration and Master Facilitation workshops. And it is an absolute joy and honor to have you here with us today. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you, Vered. Thank you.
Would you be willing to start us off by sharing a little bit about your story? How did you get into this pretty incredible, unique line of work?
Well, it's a great question, and I could probably tell a lot of information about that, but I'll just kind of make it a short, simple bit of information. I had been studying and working with people using clinical hypnotherapy, and that was the closest fit I'd ever found to what I thought I really wanted to be doing with my life, trying to find some kind of method that would be helpful for people, but would also be very fulfilling for me personally. And so I had been introduced to hypnotherapy and really loved it and decided that I would go that path myself, and ended up meeting my third husband through the hypnotherapy work. And so Jim and I, he had been an instructor in hypnotherapy and had a hypnotherapy training academy in Denver, Colorado for a while. And when we met, it was like, oh my gosh, this is really, what I thought I was supposed to be doing with my life. But as life would have it, things intervene, and I ended up attending a Thursday morning breakfast group that was about, it was a business group, but it was a spiritual background group where it's called Business Honoring Spirituality. And so several of the ladies in that group had gone to a PSYCH-K basic workshop, and they were all excited about it. And so they were telling me about it. And for whatever reason, I wasn't interested at that point in time. It just didn't feel right, didn't sound right, etc. And so I really turned my interest in a different direction, because I was very focused on the hypnotherapy work. But one of the ladies was very persistent, and I really adore her. Her name is Jessica, and she's one of those kinds of people that has a pretty good idea what a person's supposed to be doing with their life. So Jessica remained persistent, and I finally shut her down, and I just said, enough already. I'm not interested. I'm staying focused on what I'm doing. I don't want to engage anything else. And she just looked at me and went, okay. But I could tell by her tone of voice and her attitude that there was something more going on. But she did leave me alone. And then I ended up going to a Bruce Lipton presentation. I think that was in March. And that not this year, this was many years ago. But I had gone to this presentation with my husband. And after that program, I said, oh my gosh, this is what I've got to look into. And I hadn't really put two and two together that this was the same thing Jessica had told me about until later that evening, when my husband and I watched a little DVD presentation that we picked up at the big presentation that Bruce Lipton had been at. And I went, oh, wow, this is what Jessica was talking about. And I felt so embarrassed, because she could tell how important this would be for me. And anyway, so the rest is history, as they say. And so I ended up getting into a basic workshop as soon as I could. And Rob Williams was the instructor for that program, and Bruce Lipton was there. And it was a retreat that they used to do together on a very regular basis. So I got to have the benefit of both of them for instruction, and it was a delight. And as soon as that workshop was over, I said, oh my God, this is where my life force energy needs to be put. And I'm very amazed at how beautifully this works for people and how much it changes their lives in such a short amount of time. And so I'm very, very grateful for Rob Williams and Bruce Lipton and all that they've done to bring this to people in the world and help market it. So anyway, and then you and I found each other through a class. And so now here you are, and I'm here on your podcast and getting to dive into a topic that's near and dear to both of us.
And that topic today is grief. Some of you may know that my grandfather passed away recently, and I reached out to Karen when he was in his kind of near-death stage for support, and Karen was very kind to offer some guidance to me. And so we decided to have this conversation to support those of you who too have either gone through grief or perhaps are currently experiencing that in your life to hopefully ease some of that pain. So Karen, would you be willing to kind of start us off on this conversation by sharing a little bit of what grief is?
Well, grief is a huge topic, and it's experienced by everyone on the planet very, very differently. And I think there is a lot of commonalities that can be read about in books and things like that. But even though there's all of that to draw upon, each person goes through their own grief experience with a family member or a friend in very, very different ways, because we have unique relationships with each person. And all of those relationships are really tied into us very, very deeply at a subconscious level. So we have perhaps anger that comes to the surface when someone dies. Perhaps we have sadness. Perhaps we have wishes for unexpressed feelings or regrets that come to our awareness because we could have done something differently, etc. And each person has to deal with each of those kinds of facets, and to help identify what those facets are is a really critical part of the healing journey for the emotions and for the feelings that we have, and to let grief be experienced as it needs to be, and not make ourselves wrong for feeling a certain way or wanting a certain outcome. Maybe we feel like we need to get back to work immediately, or maybe we feel like we need to take a year off. Some cultural traditions have year-long grieving patterns that they expect the family members to go through, and even some of the friends that are very close to the family. So it's a real different kind of a journey based on our culture or lack of cultural support. I would say there's also that can be a big concern. So with all of the varieties of things that can happen, we have to understand each person's journey is very unique to them.
I recently had a conversation with a woman who had lost 2 grandchildren. They were twins who passed right after birth. And she and I spoke, and she said, my whole family wants me to just be positive and to just focus on the good, but I can't. I need to go through it. And some days I just can't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I just, and I need them to be able to let me. So what can we do to help ourselves and others through the process?
Well, first of all, I think as you were speaking, one of the thoughts that came to my awareness is about loss. We've all had losses in our lives that we've not necessarily had people maybe die before, but we've had losses, whether it's been a loss of a friendship or a loss of a job or a loss of a relationship of some meaningful significance, whether it's a divorce that takes place in the family, or maybe a child gets involved in drug activity. There's a loss that happens with that because there's the loss of the child's innocence. And we have losses of all kinds of magnitudes. And each of those bring about our own personal grief regarding those losses. But a lot of times people think, well, grief is only when somebody dies. But I would ask for us to take a look at this is a spectrum. It's not just a death of a friend or a family member, it's a loss. And sometimes our way of predicting how we're going to handle things is to look at how we've handled losses in the past. So have we been resilient? Have we taken the lump, so to speak, of a loss of a job or a loss of whatever, knowing that a better day is coming and we'll find things again quickly and we'll get back up on our feet again really fast? Or are we the kind of person that a loss really significantly sets us back, meaning that we maybe aren't so resilient and we have a harder time getting back into the swing of things? So, and each loss is going to be different, of course, in our life too. So a loss of a job might not be as significant to us as a loss of a very, very dear friend that, all of a sudden turns away from us because of a misunderstanding or something like that might happen. But sometimes a job loss is even more significant than a loss of a friend because it's our livelihood, perhaps. And maybe we have all of our identity tied up into it. So how do we look at loss? That's a really important thing. And to identify how we want to be. So one of the most important things about our healing is for us to think about how we want to be. And I'm going to share a personal story with you to help illustrate this. So my husband, Jim, and I were married for almost 12 years. We didn't quite make it 12 years. He developed Alzheimer's. And for the previous 2 years, he had been in an assisted living facility. The Alzheimer's had gotten to a more severe state, and he was doing some things he wasn't supposed to be doing, like taking a car and driving a car off the property of the assisted living facility that he was living at. And it wasn't even his car, I would say. It was somebody else's car. And on the second day that it happened, and actually it was 2 years ago, the day after Thanksgiving of this year, it was 2 years ago this year that this happened. And so it was very concerning, of course. And the manager said, we can't have this liability issue. He needs to be in a more stronger level of care, and he really needs to be in a situation where he's not able to get access to vehicles and be walking off property. So he'd been on a very open campus kind of a thing, and he's a man that was a very free bird. He had a very, very big life. He lived life in a very big way. So for him to be in a very shut down, kind of locked down kind of a situation for him was really a death sentence. And literally he moved on February 1st of this year, of 2021, to a facility. And by February 20th, he had left his body already. And but before he had left and before he had really lost his capacity for a conversation, we had an agreement. So our agreement, when we were able to have those kinds of conversations, was that if he left first, I was to go ahead and live my life fully, and I was not to be wrapped up in grief and holding myself back, that I needed to do what I knew my path was, which is to, at this time anyway, to instruct PSYCH-K. And that I was to live fully and to have fun and to engage and never hold back. And so that was our agreement. And so when he passed, I really had to feel my feelings, because it's one thing to say everything's going to be fine, and it's another thing to feel that sudden surprise, knowing the day is going to come. In my case, I knew his day would come where he would transition out of his body. And that's part of what I want to share with you today, is that part of understanding grief is having your own agreement with how you want to go through it. And if you have the blessing of knowing that someone is going to be dying in your life, you can prepare for that and make an agreement with yourself and maybe with that other person about how you'd like to go through that type of experience and what that other person would, expect or hope for you too. So at this point in my life, I've lost my mother and my father and both sets of my grandparents and my husband. And I've also had 2 husbands prior to Jim, and so I consider those major losses as well. So we need to be able to think about how we want to handle loss. I think that's one of our most important things we can do for ourselves, is to kind of pre-plan, because this is one thing that will happen to all of us. We will lose the people that we love very, very much, and we will lose things that matter to us, such as jobs or other things too. And so we have to say, how do we want to go through that and make a plan for ourselves? If we can make a plan, then we have something to shoot for. We have something to move towards, and not be just kind of like washed away with the experience of grief itself. So one of the things I've noticed for myself, it completely caught me off guard as a grief issue, was very highly distractible. And I was also having a tremendous amount of difficulty managing my time. And I just couldn't get my timing to come online for me. And so I've really noticed that. And I think that has been one of my grief issues that has completely bamboozled me, because I wasn't feeling like I was grieving, yet I just felt like I was off. My timing was off. So even though we plan, we don't necessarily understand all the time how things are going to happen. And so, but having a plan at least gives us something to anchor to, and we can ride that experience out without feeling so completely lost at sea, so to speak. So I'll let you pick it up, Vered. What do you want to talk about next?
Thank you, Karen. This is really helpful because you've kind of shared with us some strategies, where possible, to prepare in advance, to have those conversations, to agree on the expectations so there's a little more ease. And there are times when we don't get to prepare.
We can prepare for the inevitable. This is what I meant, is all of us are going to experience losses. We may not see them coming. They may be sudden things that happen when they happen. But we know that there is a possibility that we will lose our spouse before we die. So it's this piece I'm asking us to consider, is to say, if that were to happen, what would I do? How would I want myself to behave, so that we can preset what we want? One of the beautiful things about PSYCH-K is to be working on what we want instead of the downside that we're experiencing. So if we experience some kind of a limitation, or we experience some kind of a problem, one of the first questions we ask our person that we're working with is, what do you want instead? Because if we don't have something to shoot for, we're never going to get to that point. We have to be able to identify what we want so that we can get there. And so, maybe we'll be lucky, and other people will have to deal with our death. We'll be the first one out of the game. but I don't want to have that be my situation. Like, I've already thought, what would I do if my daughter died? What would I do if her husband died? I know that all of these dear relationships, all these people would want me to move on and find happiness in my life. The bigger question is, would I let myself do that? Or would I be so tied in with their loss that I would literally crumble to pieces?
So some people listening might be thinking, oh my goodness, I don't want to think about that. And what if by thinking about it, I might be somehow contributing to it happening? What might you say to those individuals?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Jim was my best teacher in this area too, because you'd have to know the man to understand just how wild and crazy his life actually was. But he had multiple, and I do mean multiple, exit opportunities. He had an appendicitis rupture when he was 4 years old. He'd been a narcotics officer. He had been an explosive specialist. He'd gone to Egypt, where he had removed landmines from the Arab-Israeli war. And after that, there were other opportunities. He should have died, car accidents and other kinds of things that happened. And this man was like a cat with 9 lives. He just wouldn't go. So why I'm saying that is because I really believe that we are not going to go before it is our time. And I really think we have an agreement with spirit, or God or universe or whatever, higher power each of you identify with. I think we have an agreement when it's time to go, it's time to go. And we don't get to barter. We don't get to negotiate that departure time.
Thank you, Karen. And
Yeah.
I'm curious because we mentioned the subconscious mind a little bit earlier. And what I know for sure is that what we resist persists. So if we don't want to think about certain things or we're scared to think about them, that actually energetically brings that more to the surface. But of course, we might not be conscious of that. So the idea here is, I imagine what you're proposing by kind of hallucinating. What might we do? How might we be resilient if something were to happen? Is really just to calm the subconscious mind and to give it strategies, should something happen, so that it would lessen the resistance.
Yeah, well, as far as subconscious goes, one of the things that we can help people with is to reduce resistance, because resistance is futile, as we learned from, the Star Trek generation. So, and, you really think about it, that's true. Resistance is futile. What we want to do is be able to map out a course of action that we don't even need to include resistance, that we can have a plan. So before the show, I had told you the very brief story, a brief version of the story about the lady in Chicago. Would you like me to share that at this time?
Yes, please.
Okay. So it was a class that I was teaching. It was a basic workshop, and a woman had come to the class, and she had had her son die in her home, in his bedroom. He was not living at home, but he had come back home. I don't remember what the circumstances were now, but they'd said goodnight. He'd gone to bed. She went to bed, and he died in his sleep. Well, this dear woman carried guilt, heavy, heavy, heavy guilt, that she should have known better. She should have been able to do something. She should have known that he was dying in the other room, and she should have intervened. And so for 10 years, it was 10 years after his death, she had been grieving and feeling this level of guilt, and before she came to the workshop. And so she had made this workshop an opportunity for her to deal with this problem, which is wonderful, because that's one of the things we do, is help people create transformations in their lives and understand that the issues that are really haunting are held deep in the subconscious. And the reason that they're held in the subconscious is because the subconscious holds on to things as though it was in the present moment still. So her subconscious was holding on to this moment, his death, her guilt about his death, as though it was still right now. But the subconscious doesn't understand time in the way conscious mind understands time. And so, yes, it's been 10 years, but her subconscious still had it as though it was just, very recently, yesterday or the day before. So during the workshop, she said she wanted to handle this. And on Sunday, we usually have a 3-day basic workshop. And so on Sunday, I said, "Are you ready?" And she said, "Yes, I am." Now, this lady had put away all of her son's pictures. She could not have a picture of him anywhere in the home. She couldn't have any of his things. She couldn't walk into his room. So basically, the door was shut, and that's how it had been for 10 years. So I said, okay, let's go for it. So we did this process, which is about transforming stressful situations in our lives. And she beamed at the end of the process. Now, you might say, how does this work and how fast does it work? Well, it works so fast that it was about 5 minutes maximum that she was actually working this transformation process. And when she opened her eyes after this 5-minute period, she said, "Oh my God, I'm free." And I said, "Okay, how are you feeling?" And she goes, "It's all gone. I feel at peace about this. I feel okay. It's okay. He wants me to know it's okay." And so I said, "Well, great. What kind of action step would you like to take that will demonstrate to you that you really are feeling differently?" And she said, "Well, I'm going to go to the closet and I'm going to take his pictures out and I'm going to put them on a table and I'm going to send you a picture of that picture on the table. So the very next day, she did that on Monday, and then she sent me the picture of her photograph of her son on this table with a beautiful orchid, and I think there was something else on the table that was his too. And she sent me this picture, and along with the message, thank you, thank you, thank you so much, because I am free now, and I know my son wants me to be free. So this is how fast we can work with the subconscious. We can update the program in the subconscious. Her guilt program was running 10 years, and her grieving program was running for 10 years. So she had both of these things taking place. And in 5 minutes, we were able to help her shift her perspective on all of that and transform into a new reality. And that's what we do with the subconscious. Even though it's been 10 years, the subconscious doesn't understand time like that. So there is hope. I want you guys to know there is hope. If you are grieving and you are having a very hard time and you're feeling stuck, there are so many things that we can do to help you move beyond the grief and to help yourself move beyond the grief if you prefer to do that yourself. The main question is, are you ready? Because this lady hadn't been ready to transform until she came to that workshop. So I just wanted to share that story because it's so amazing and illustrates so beautifully how incredibly locked up the subconscious can be and how easily it can be freed.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen. And I've had an opportunity to experience some rapid transformations with clients as well, and in my own life. One of them, thanks to you, actually, in one of our workshops. And, in a situation like she experienced where it was completely unexpected, right? She had not prepared, if you will. She had not said the things she may have wanted to say or heard the things she may have wanted to hear. She didn't have that completion. I imagine that grief is much more intense, or perhaps can last longer, not necessarily, but what does that completion aspect to it do? Because I'm thinking of my own father as I ask this question. He passed about 3 years ago, and a few days before he passed, he knew it was kind of near the end. He had invited our entire family, all his children and grandchildren, and basically to every single one of us said his goodbyes and shared his love, and we got to share what we needed to say, and I believe that everybody in the family really appreciated, although it was kind of odd and it was just kind of a surreal experience to do that, but yet now in retrospect we can see how healing that was for all of us. It was such a gift. So this brings to mind a question, which is, what if the listener of this podcast, what if they are the ones who are preparing to move on or transition? What guidance might you have for them in order to feel as complete as they can be?
Yeah, and there's several different points there, I think, Vera, that we could make. One is for us to set ourselves at peace with our own life. Many people believe in some kind of a spiritual connection. And if that is the listener's orientation, I would suggest that they really hone in on what does that mean for them. When my mother was dying, I asked her, what do you think waits for you beyond this life? And she says, oh my gosh, I think it's going to be the best adventure ever. And so she was in this amazing place that really kind of surprised me. So she had set things right in her mind with her creator, and she felt very assured that she knew what was going to be happening with herself. So if there are people that don't have that kind of spiritual orientation, then discussing with somebody else what you think death is about and helping yourself prepare for what that means to you. and just not only discussing it, but setting it straight in your own subconscious. I think one of the things that keeps people from dying is their fear of letting go. And I've worked with many people who say, my mother lingered, my father lingered, they just wouldn't let go, they just wouldn't let go. And they were very fearful. And so having an understanding of what death is and what it isn't necessarily can really be helpful. So I think that's real important, is to know in your own mind what death is for you. And if there is an afterlife, then what is that about? Again, not everybody believes in an afterlife, but if you do, then, be comfortable with that. Once you've set things straight within your own heart and mind, I think it's really important to have a conversation, as your father did with everyone. I listened to that and I thought, oh my God, how beautiful is that? Because my dad, when he was dying, he had lymphoma, and he refused to think he was dying. He absolutely, literally refused to believe that he was gonna, be dead in a few days. And he, got angry with us because we, were hovering around him and everything, trying to help him with everything. He was struggling so badly. But he would not talk about his passing. He would not talk about his feelings. He would not talk about what he wanted. He absolutely refused to share any of that with us. And so I really thought how much more comfortable he could have been had he been accepting of this being his final days. And what would he wish for us? I would have loved to have known, what he had wished for us. And have a conversation, about what was important to life and lessons that he had learned.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry, Karen.
Well, it's just variations, isn't it? I mean, you had this wonderful experience with your dad, and then I had the complete opposite with mine. And, it fascinates me. Death absolutely fascinates me, because we're all going to do it. We're all going to die. Every single one of us on this planet is going to die. There is no other option. We come in and we're going out at some point. And so why do we make it into this horrible conversation? Why do we avoid it? Why do we pretend like it doesn't exist when it absolutely does? And I think it's super important for us to have these conversations with our families and loved ones, because it helps everybody feel grounded. It helps everybody feel brought together with a sense of connection that doesn't exist otherwise. And we are the creators of these moments. We are the creators of these experiences with our family members. So we have to say, what would I like to have this be like? One of my very dear friends, who is turning 75 in just a very short number of days, she already has her funeral all planned out. She has her music selected. She has her obituary written. She has all of the things done. And several people have copies of it in case somebody isn't available to help, and somebody else can step in and assist. And she just is a delight, and she's so lighthearted about it all. And I love how she has embraced this opportunity to plan for that inevitable day, and she says, I don't know when it's going to happen, and I don't care when it happens. I'm just happy being alive every day that I get to be alive. But, when it happens, here's the music I want. Here's what the conversation pieces I want. This is the kind of service I want. and it takes so much burden off of the family, because if we don't know what's wanted, we just have to guess at it, so yeah, so it's beautiful.
That's just a brilliant, beautiful example. And I imagine it lessens some of the uncertainty, the fear in her own body, and brings
Yeah.
more lightness and may I say joy, because she's planning a celebration.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what she wants it to be. She says, it better be a party. Otherwise, I'm coming back and I'm going to have a big, strong word with everybody. Yeah. Yeah. So if we realize that we create so many wonderful things in our lives, we create arguments with people, we create difficulties with people, but we can create joy, and we can create connection, and we can create beautiful moments too. And I think we need to start looking at this part of our lives and saying, how do I want this to be?
We started this conversation about grief, and it almost feels like it's morphed into a conversation about empowerment.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
To do those things that are within our control. Of course, many things are not, but some things are within our control, to prepare, to share, to lessen that fear for ourselves and others. Because as you said, it is inevitable. And by preparing ourselves, being more resilient, we're not inviting it anytime sooner, but we are creating a situation where when it does come, whenever that might be, that we ease our own transition and all our loved ones' response to our transition. So I thank you for making this conversation just so real, and for sharing your personal stories, the stories with your clients, and giving us a little piece of empowerment, some things that we can do to help us. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Vered. And to all of you who are still in a body, may you find peace, and may you experience a journey that is full of love and wonder. That was something else Jim really wanted, was to have a very full life, and he did. He lived this amazingly full life, and he wanted me to have a full and wonder-filled life, and so I'm fulfilling that agreement.
That's right.
Yeah. So thank you, and I appreciate this opportunity to share. And thank you so much, Vered. And may this bring blessings to you and your friends and your family and whoever else listens to this amazing podcast. So thanks for bringing up a tough topic.
Yes, and I thank you. And I want to know, how can people learn how to engage with you, work with you? I know you have many workshops and you do coaching. What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, well, so my current website is subconsciouschange.com. And people can find me there and read a lot of different information. Email is Karen, Karen, at subconsciouschange.com. And a phone number, if you would prefer that. Texts work best for me. That phone number is 719-648-3070. And that's +1 country code United States. So +1 719-648-3070. And yeah, my home is your home. I have workshops in my home quite frequently, and love to be able to share what I call the sacred space sanctuary, because this is truly a sacred space where people enter in and have amazing experiences happen for them. Whatever people want to work on, we work on it, and it's a beautiful journey together. It's Vered can validate. We have very interesting, wonderful talks, as well as growth opportunities that are very personal to you, and you get to choose the topics you want to work on. So it's a gift you give yourself that keeps on giving to yourself and others for a very, very long time.
It is. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Vered. I really appreciate this opportunity.